Hello, this is Bertold, and I'm here to introduce you today to our new episode of Voices in My Head, the podcast where Basil Sands talks all about audiobooks and things like that with wonderful narrators and people in the business. Like today, he's got the amazing Sean Pratt coming up for you, and he's going to be talking all about his history of audiobooking and things like that. You know, we got a lot of guests lined up for the next few weeks. I think we should hire an administrative assistant. What do you think, brother? I think that's a grand idea, Bertold. We do need to put out an advertisement for one. Muffin, why don't you go put one out? Make an advertisement online or something, or put it out in the magic mail so that we can have a new person come and maybe be our admin assistant. Oh, would you know, I already put one out there. I did that a couple of weeks ago. Oh, good. Very forward-looking of you. Okay, so when do we have any applicants that have tried? Well, I got one that answered via the phone call, and he said he should be here any time now. Oh, how about that? Someone's here already. I bet you it's him. Well, he's got a heavy knock. Oh, but Jesus, that's a troll.
Hello, my name's Gerald. I'm here for the interview.
Roll the show, please.
Here we are with Sean Pratt, talking on Voices in My Head, talking about audiobooks like we always do. And Sean, you've been in this business quite a while. You've been here. When did you start in audiobooks?
Let's see. I started officially this summer of '96. I had learned about audiobooks from I did a play in Washington D.C. in 1994. That's where my wife Shannon, we did a play at the Shakespeare Theater in D.C. We played opposite each other. We had a showmance, as they say in the business. And I'm an actor in that group, that company of actors who did audiobooks. His name is David Hilder, and he still narrates. And he sort of filled me in on what it was like. And he said, if you ever move down to the D.C. area, give me a call and I can introduce you to some people. And so when I moved down in '96 to be with Shannon, I didn't really have any work. The work I thought I'd lined up had fallen through. And so I gave him a call and he said, well, you should call this friend of mine. He's a narrator. He does some producing on the side. His name is Grover Gardner. And so I called Grover up and I got him on the phone. And he said, David said, now don't be put off. Grover can be a little gruff on the phone. And I said, oh, okay. So he said, oh, okay, come over next Wednesday. I'm like, okay, great. So next Wednesday arrives. I drive over to his place in D.C. And he comes to the door. It's about 11 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday, and he's in his pajamas. He looks like a skinny Ed Herman at that time, like a young skinny Ed, round glasses, his hair's all askew. He's got his pajamas on. He's got a cigarette in one hand, coffee in the other, his paper under his arm. He's like, oh, yeah, I forgot you were coming. Okay, come on in, have a seat. Let me get you some coffee. And so we talked about the business. I spent, 3-4 hours there with him. And what impressed me immediately was here was an actor who worked at home when he wanted to, as an actor, doing something really interesting, audiobooks, which I'd never done, and making really good money doing it. And I thought, I don't know how to do this yet, but I'm going to learn. And so we made a little demo, and I always joke, Grover and I are good friends now, and I always say that if Grover knew what he was in for when I came to his house, he probably should have thrown me off his stoop because I proceeded to cajole and charm and bully him until he found me some work. And my first 2 clients were Books on Tape and Blackstone Audio. And that's how I started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what was the difference between the way things went back then versus how it goes now, the process of doing the audiobooks?
Well, we had to fire up the steam engine to get the recording equipment to work. And
so you had that ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk going in the background, had to edit that out.
You have a rhythm to it.
Yeah.
We had, back in the day, we worked on a thing called ADAT tape, which was really a VHS tape. And you'd put it in, you had to run it through and put a time code down on it. And the VHS tape had 8 tracks, which equaled 4 cassettes, right?
Oh, wow.
A and B sides. And so you would record, track 1 would be side 1, side A, then the next one, side 1B, and so on. And And then also for some clients like Books on Tape, you would also dub off the tape when you were finished onto cassettes because that's what they used to make copies. So you did a fair amount of the basic grunt engineering for them.
Huh.
And but it was I mean the only thing we didn't do would be like in a real recording studio where they would cut and splice the takes together. But you would just back the tape up and punch in and roll in and record over what you did if you made a mistake. So when Pro Tools came out, like we finally went digital in 2000, it was like, the return of, it was like manna from heaven. Suddenly you could get right down to the exact spot you wanted to punch in on.
I imagine mistakes would be pretty unforgiving in that.
Oh yeah, it was so hard. I mean, now when I'm teaching my students about doing really, let's say you have a list of like 5 names, and one's German, then a French, then Hebrew, then Latin, and then South America, like Brazilian. Well, back in the day, you had to do a take where you got all 5 correct in a row, right? Now, of course, you can do them singularly and cut and paste them together and then make it all flow together. Well, you couldn't do that. It had to be done in one continuous take. Yeah. And it was very unforgiving. It was
a different skill level there.
It was tough. The very first session I ever had, my very first book was Cabbages and Kings by Henry, and I scheduled my time at Grover's house because he had booths you could rent out. And I had a monitor for that first session. And then she just sat and listened. So when I made a mistake, she'd sort of click, you said street light, it should be street lamp. And then, so we started in, and in 3 hours, my 3-hour session, I got like precisely about 15 minutes of material done.
Wow.
In 3 hours. And I drove back to our place in Alexandria, Virginia, and I walked in the door and I dropped my briefcase and I just sort of collapsed on the carpet in the front room. And Shannon stood over me. She's like, "Are you okay?" And I looked up at her. I was like, "This is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be." Just the stress of, performing and dealing with the tape machine and all of it together was, even though I'd been practicing, it was a totally different experience.
Wow. That is something.
Oh, God.
I did. About that same time, the mid-'90s, I was doing a little bit of television voiceover work up in our big production city of Fairbanks, Alaska, all 40,000 people. And I remember some of those machines, but I would be in the studio for 60 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
It was just TV spots, and so it was really short. And now that you're mentioning that, it's like, man, those guys, they were doing a lot of work. I guess that's why they charge the studios or the TV stations so much, because of all the... Man, anyway, that's interesting to know, the big difference. I mean, that shows for the newbies that are coming out and getting into this, we got it so easy.
In my day,
back in the day,
we did it this way. Get off my lawn. Get out of my booth. And the one thing that was a savior was that I was a carpenter. When I started my acting career and getting through college, I was a carpenter and a house painter. So I would build our booths because my wife Shannon also narrates. And the very first booth we ever made, to save money, I made it on the outside 4x4, so the inside was like 3x3, and I used to refer to it as the Gemini capsule because it was just, you climbed in and there was no room for anything, and you'd shut the door. I mean, it literally feels like the screen of this thing right now.
Oh yeah.
You'd record, and then when you screwed up and you had to go back, you'd have to open the door and lean out and look at the tape counter sometimes to get the thing matching up, and shut the door and start in again.
Oh, man.
Oh, man, it was...
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. My shoulders would be touching both sides in that thing.
Oh, yeah. I'm not a small person, so...
Yeah.
It was,
I get claustrophobia. Thinking about it. Mine's 4x5, and I feel uncomfortably tight sometimes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, and then we have a 4x6 Gretchen booth now, and that we can break down and take with us, so I never have to build another booth in my life, thank God. And but even then, it can get tight. We learned, like with the Gretchen, we just came, as a rectangle, and we had learned by that time to tweak it so that we actually face into the corner of the booth, so you have much more horizontal distance across your, and that's a good thing for us because we don't have another one of us have any really big bass voices, and sometimes low frequency sound can get stuck in corners if you're not careful. But we have such a light voice, like you have a really nice big deep voice, and sometimes
I got to watch to make sure it doesn't rumble when I'm recording.
Exactly. But the being in the corner gave you more elbow room,
That's good for the science of booth building. Take notes, kids. Take notes.
Well, this is
do
the
this one day.
fifth booth. This is our fifth booth, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, built quite a few.
Wow. Well, I built my first built one last summer. And I moved out of the closet, came out of the closet, as they say. And now I'm in the garage in this nice little wooden booth that's on wheels. I actually had designed it to go in our house. And but when my wife saw the dimensions as it sat in the garage, it was a little bit bigger initially. And she saw the dimensions height-wise. She was like, that's not going in the bedroom. And,
over my dead body.
Exactly. So here I sit, and it actually works pretty good out here. This is my man cave. So
yeah, ours is in our office, and so we try our best when we have to be on the computer outside the booth to try to be as quiet as possible, but it never works. You're always making a little bit some noise, and and
that's during that one line that the other person was having a hard time with, and
and then
first take they get it right.
Yeah, and then have a teenager in your house too thumping around.
Oh yeah.
So, the thing is people always they obsess about, it has to be a soundproof. No, it's not soundproof. The booth itself is designed to make the inside as sonically dry as possible. It's not meant to be soundproof. There's no way you can make. I mean, it's next to impossible. You're always going to be dealing with every place we've ever lived had different issues, whether it was airplanes or buses or kids or whatever.
Right.
And you have to just work around that. I was advising one of my students about they're dealing with a new house they've purchased, and the bedroom they want to put their booth in has a lot of traffic noise, and I said, you're going to have to build a second layer around your booth, to get rid of the high-end, low-frequency sounds. It's going to be a room within a room, literally, within the room, I guess. And but there's no such. I've never, unless you're going to a high-end real recording studio,
right?
You just have to give over that's life. That's just the way it works.
Yep. That is, and that's one of the things. Speaking of studios, how do you, in your experience, how do you equate studio work like radio, regular voiceover, television commercials, things like that? How do you equate those with your experience in audiobooks?
The analogy that I draw, I've been asked this question many times, and it's very astute of you to ask that question. The analogy I draw is a musical one. I think that basically, for my money, there's three kinds of voiceover. There's the 30 to 60 second radio spot. There are documentary voiceovers, and then there's audiobooks. So they each have a different style and presentation to them, but the easiest way I try to explain it is the 30 to 60 second radio TV spots are like being the lead guitarist in a rock band. You have to be note perfect when you start. There's no time to warm up. It has to be perfect. You have to grab the listener with the first word, right? The middle one, the documentary voiceover, is sort of like being in a jazz combo where you can step forward and warm up into your solo, as it were. And none of the soloists are meant to outshine the other soloists. They're all supposed to work together, which is akin to what a documentary voiceover is supposed to do. It's supposed to just support the picture. If you're watching like How It's Made, I think that's a perfect example. That guy in How It's Made, he's flat as a pancake, but that's okay because he's there to explain what is it you're seeing.
Right.
You're not supposed to go, wow, that's really amazing voiceover. No, it's supposed to support the picture. And then the last, for audiobooks, to me, it's like being first chair in an orchestra, where you've got this tremendously long piece of music with all these different movements, and each movement has a different character or tone. That would be like the chapters.
Right.
And yet you are still driving in the long sense toward, da-da at the end. And it's, it is a marathon. It's a much, of course you don't record the entire book in a day, but you have to keep the presence of mind to know where you're at in the piece, just like a violinist does, or someone in an orchestra. So that's how I describe it, because, there's nuance with technique and style, but as you know from going in to do, a radio or TV spot, you walk in, you do your little, da-da-da-da-da-dum, and you leave.
Yeah.
And they just require something different, but that's how I think of them.
Perfect. That's a really good analogy. I like that. Man,
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I was a bit of a musician back in the day, and that I could see that. I could really picture that.
Yeah, I have good friends who are voiceover artists who do tons and tons of TV and radio spots, and they all say they want to get into audiobooks. And then I always say, go take the test. Go watch my video. Go take the test. And then all of them go, you sit in that many hours on your butt in the studio every day? My God, I'd go crazy. I'm like,
that's what this job is. Yeah, there was a Facebook conversation I was watching the other day on Audiobook Crowd that was talking about that exact thing. And one of the guys who was a TV documentary narrator said that exact same thing. So, I tried it and ain't no way. Yeah. I'll do an hour or two for this show, but I'm not going to do 6-7 hours a day every day. So
I've always called it eating the elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One forkful at a time. And to make it even worse, you're the only one allowed to eat the elephant.
Yeah. You've got to eat this whole thing before it's
That's right. It always gets, how long does it take you to record a book? I'm like, till I finish eating the elephant. That's how long it takes.
There you go. There you go. How would you compare your early works when you first started doing this and you were learning how to eat the elephant? Because recently I listened to an old one that you did. I think it was 98 maybe, so it was probably recorded in 97, 98. Starship Troopers.
Oh my God, yeah.
My one son likes to read the books. The other one, he plays with robotics and stuff and likes to have an audiobook going while he's doing his computer programming. And he wanted to listen to it, so we got it and listened to it. And I was like, hey, this is Sean. It was one of your pseudonyms, and I didn't recognize it at first. And
Lloyd James.
That's right, Lloyd James, yeah. And how would you compare yourself then as a narrator to your style and method today?
I tell people it took me about 40 books to become a narrator, and that one was within the 40-book range. I just got lucky with Blackstone Audio at that time. They had gotten a bunch of the Heinlein books, so I ended up recording, like, I did that one, and Time Enough for Love, and The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and Citizen of the Galaxy, and Puppet Master, like 5 or 6 of his books.
Wow.
That was the first one. And what I get when I listen back to it, because I listened to a segment of it a while back. I actually have a copy of it from back in the day. And I'm aware of how hard I'm trying. How much effort it takes to maintain the tempo of the piece. So, and that I hadn't found my sea legs yet. I mean, I hadn't gotten or stamina. So when I'm listening back to something like that, I can hear the effort involved. I'm curious, what did you think?
I thought it was pretty good. It was a little slow for me. But so I just put it up to 1.25 on the Audible player, and it worked great. But now that you described how you guys were doing it with those ADAT tapes, it's like, oh, that makes sense, because you really have to be measured in what you're doing to keep the flow going.
Yeah, it was
in an environment where mistakes could really cost you a lot.
Well, it was just tougher with the technology at the time.
Right.
But that's actually a very good note. I mean, I agree with you. It was, if I were coaching myself, the younger version of me, I'd say pick up the tempo here and there. It's something that I've learned now. When I'm teaching is, there are certain moments in an audiobook that you look for that you can reflexively pick the tempo up. And the obvious ones in fiction are things like, when the aliens are landing, or when there's a love scene or a car chase or the bad guys doing something. Those are just like in a movie, you know.
Right.
They pick up the tempo of the edits and the sound. The music gets louder, so you can automatically pick it up. But also, going back to, I would be telling my earlier self to think faster. That's been my, you know, when you and I were working together, I was like, my general note for everybody is think faster. And when you think faster, as a consequence, you begin to narrate faster. Not just that you just go faster.
Right.
You're just on top of it.
You're able to keep up
your toes as opposed to your heels.
Right. Well, that said, my son thought it was the perfect tempo. Because we actually had that discussion, that technical.
He has taste and culture then.
He has taste and culture. Well, and the thing is, he was doing something else with his hands and part of his brain, and so it was the perfect speed because he could hear the words going by, and the spaces were good enough to get his attention. Right. And Andy was able to focus on building this little robot thing that he was doing. And so he's trying to conquer the world, is what it is.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, good.
So he was getting ideas from that book, apparently.
Yeah, it's a good primer for that, too. Yeah.
So, do you think a VO or a radio person can easily make the transition into audiobooks?
Well, not necessarily. Yes and no. I don't want to equivocate. I'll tell you why yes, and I'll tell you why no. The yes answer comes to the fact that they're very comfortable in front of the microphone. Mm-hmm. They're comfortable in the environment of the studio. They're comfortable dealing with copy and reading it cold. You know, if I recall right, like before Simon Vance got into audiobooks, he was an announcer for the BBC.
Right.
So he had years of just literally being handed copy and like, you're on. And that's a skill. It's not you can learn how to do that. Mm-hmm. You can learn how to pick up a piece of a text and just read it cold. But it takes a lot of practice. And it requires, once again, thinking very fast, taking the information in. And so someone from the radio and VO world has all that technical skill. Where it can be very difficult for them, so the no part of the answer, is suddenly making them sit for hours in a studio and maintaining, like I said, the orchestra analogy comes into play, maintaining the tempo over chapter after chapter after chapter. Right. And within that, altering the tempo to fit the piece. Right. Then you're also asking people from the VO and radio background to suddenly become actors. It's one thing to go, come on down to Southwest Forward and get your new, or to do a documentary where you're just like, and then the buffalo looks out across the Serengeti, or whatever. Now you were going, I can't pay the rent, but you must pay the rent. You're playing characters and you're keeping all of that going. And that's a tall order for some people, Oh, yeah. That's a whole different level of performance that they're not used to. So really, the no part boils down to stamina and then acting chops. So yes and no is the answer. Good answer. Because there's going to be people who can and people who can't. Right. And yeah, well, that's pretty cool. Now, for those who think they can and want to get into it, coaching. This is something that I know you do, and several other narrators that I know do as well. And what path do you recommend a brand new person who A, thinks they want to get into it, or maybe has tried and wants to do it right? What path would you recommend them taking to become the consummate professional? The first thing I would say is start reading aloud every day. It's no different from doing any other kind of if you want to learn how to play piano, you need to play piano every day. You have to practice, because as good as they might think they are, reading aloud, or maybe they have some performance background, we're talking about, as you well know, you have to record every single day. Right. And just to build, not only just to build up the vocal chops, but the mental stamina, the physical stamina of speaking for that long. And then I'm not even talking about dealing with the equipment. And then, I always tell people that, I'm all about saving money, and about as many things that I can give someone to do that's free for them, the only thing it's costing them is their time, I'll always recommend it. Oh, it's my wife back.
Sorry.
That's okay.
You have visitors. Live.
Yeah, I know.
Say
Really.
hi,
No,
Shannon.
I was like, the cat's stealing my wife's phone. Why is she doing that?
Hey, how
this
you
my-
doing, ma'am? Good to see you in person.
Sorry to interrupt.
He's coming to APAC, by the way.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Okay, let me see where I picked that up. Let's see. So if the person takes the time to actually do the physical act of recording, I'll tell all my. Should I start again?
Oh, that's okay.
Okay.
Don't worry. It makes it live.
Okay, good. That brings the drama to the fore.
I'll have some good little subtitles around that.
Okay. All right. So the first thing is to practice every day, and you can do that on your own, right? And the only direction I give newbies is don't just read it aloud. Read it like you're reading it to somebody.
Mm.
You're performing it, and regardless of whether or not you even have equipment.
Mm.
Like I say in my little video on the test, I said just put up a music stand with the text and go at it. But as far as getting coaching and classes, as you've mentioned, the first place I tell people to look, I always do, is go on YouTube. It's free. Pat Fraley has these great videos up there. Mm-hmm. I think Paul Rubin might too. I'm not sure. But there's other voice coaches in general, right? And they all put up their stuff. And I'm like, if you just take the time, it's that Good Will Hunting scene where he tells the guy, I got my education going to the library. I got it for free. I read books. I took the time. Right. But then eventually you're going to want to have one-on-one work with someone where you get that instant feedback. And, when anyone becomes a student, they're really looking for three things. They're looking for structure. Mm-hmm. They're looking for a methodology or process. And finally, they're looking for a teacher who can give them, who can end up giving them confidence. Mm. And you do that through feedback and exercises. Right. Right. So, I tell people, my specialty or my niche in the industry is nonfiction. I teach nonfiction. The principles I teach can be applied to fiction, but when you come to me, that's what I do. That's my little side niche that I work in. I'm like, okay, if you want accents, or you want, or work with character dialogue, or maybe you should go talk to Pat, or maybe go Paul, or Scott Brick, or Carol Monda. Those are all reputable people that are really, they're good teachers. And if you want to go to, spend your time and money going to bigger workshops, maybe with Edge Studios has something going on. Mm-hmm. But, one of the wonderful things about living in the 21st century is that we have social media. So as you've seen on our Facebook groups and on LinkedIn and so on, someone will say, hey, I'm a newbie. I got a thing about this special workshop at Gus Johnson Studios in Chicago. Should I take it? And then immediately the feedback will start coming in about people who have done that. Because, let's be honest, this is show business. Yeah. And there's a whole lot of people out there whose really their main career path is to separate you from your money as quickly as possible. Right. With as little information given out as possible. And where you go, well, I paid $1,000 for that thing, and I got one or two good tidbits, but they weren't worth $1,000. Right. So, right. I tell people, use the network. Ask people. Ask people around. They will tell you quicker than anything else. Oh, we don't really have a Yelp. Do we have a Yelp version for audiobook teachers?
That's a good question. We should. Yeah. Mark that down. You can put.
Yeah, right. That's my next project.
Oh, wow. Excellent. So, you've mentioned taking the test in your video, and we've got the link right here on the screen for that.
Oh, good.
And so people will be able to click that and go see what the test is. Right. And what does a person need to prepare themselves with to get into audiobooks? We've talked about, taking coaching and being able to do the endurance thing, but would you say that there's a mental process or something that would help a person to not just learn the trade, but understand, feel it, really begin to get into it? Like you said, it takes 40 books to.
Yeah, it works from two different angles, Basil. The first angle is the performance end. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about learning technique and method, and inside of that technique, you're also learning mental and vocal and physical stamina. So you have that path on it too. But the other part, which is this is where so many people fall down, and this is why I make it a point when I'm teaching people that this is something I make them do, like I made you do when we were working together. It's like building marketing and advertising and networking things going on.
Right.
You know, I've been a performer since I was 10, and I have seen amazingly talented performers fail. Not because of, obviously, their talent, it's because they didn't understand. It's called show business for a reason. And this is show business. Audiobooks are show business.
Business on the side there.
Yeah.
Business is the second word.
Yes, and it's not that the best narrator will always rise to the top. That's just not the case. It's about networking, it's about marketing, it's about advertising. And what does that mean specifically, not only generally, but also specific to our industry?
Right.
And so, you know, I tell people when I'm working with them, one of the reasons I like coaching so much, I used to, I still do occasionally, but for almost 20 years I used to do one-on-one coaching for actors and singers and dancers, like a 3-hour, you know, coaching session. We come in, we try to cover all this stuff, and then they go off with their career. And I said, well, you know, contact me when you want to have a follow-up. And they never would. They would just sort of sputter along. And what I like about seeing people every week or every other week over a period of time is I can stay on them.
Right.
And say, like, hey, did you get your review sheets done? Have you tweaked your ACX profile? Did you get the, you know, are you coming to APEC? Are you going to go to this mixer in Chicago? And sort of being, what do you call those? Accountability coach. I think that's one of the jobs I have. But that's something that's really, really important. So someone getting into this about, you know, they have to understand it's not just that they have a really, you know, great, rich baritone voice, or they can, as a woman, you know, they can do 700 voices. That's great. I'm not cheapening that.
Right.
But there's a lot of people out there who can do that. It's the other piece of it. It's the staying in touch part. It's creating the right marketing materials. It's also going out and finding the work, which is also being really aggressive. Don't rely on just going to ACX. You know, I have a number of students who have gone out and found a book they wanted to do, or an author, and have created that job out of whole cloth. They, you know, my new favorite story is a student I have, a man named Mike Dennis out of Florida, who's he writes noir fiction, and he's got a really wonderful voice that's perfect for noir audiobooks. So they got that Humphrey Bogart kind of delivery.
Right.
And he was on Audible, and he happened to just be looking through books by Mickey Spillane and, you know, Mike Hammer, and he saw that I, the Jury had not been recorded as an audiobook. The noir classics. He spent the time to track down who owned the rights. We worked together. He got the materials together. He lobbied for it, and he got the book. He, you know, Simon and Schuster, I think it is. And so he's recording it right now. What a break! What a wonderful opportunity. But he went out and found it. You know, and I understand. You know, as you well know, there's a lot of people who come into audiobooks who they are coming to it from a corporate environment. And I use that in a large sense, meaning whether they were a teacher at school, or they were an accountant, or where they had some kind of business, they were working within a corporation in the sense that there was a hierarchy. You know, like whatever job they were in, there was somebody above them, and they were, you know, every quarter or every year they got reviewed, and if they did good, they got a raise or the corner office or whatever, a bonus. And suddenly they're thrown into the world of show business. And there is no structure like that. There is no group off to the side at Audible or Tantor. There's nobody. You said, well, you know, Basil's been working very hard. He's gotten 4 books. So we're going to, you know what, we're going to let him have this gigantic series for this. No, it doesn't exist.
Right.
And a lot of people just can't wrap their head around that is the new universe they've got dropped themselves into. And it scares them to death. Right. And it has to be, and like, you know, like I said, that has nothing to do with how many accents you can do or how funny you can be on tape. If you don't understand that about what we do as narrators or show business in general, you're not going to be pushing yourself out there to market and network with people. Right. So I would say it's, you know, yeah, classes are important. You know, one-on-one coaching, going to workshops. You know, like I said, people like Paul Rubin or Pat Friote or Scott Brick or Carol Munda, they are amazing coaches. And they all do fiction. That's their main specialty. I think they talk about nonfiction. And for me, when I decided I wanted to start coaching, I decided I was going to do nonfiction for a couple of reasons. One of them being that the fiction side was already well taken care of by really good people. And I was like, why fight my way into that portion of it? I'll go nonfiction. I like it anyway. It's something I can do. Right. But I wanted to add the component of teaching people about, welcome to this new universe. You have to be able to network and market.
Right. It's almost like starting your career over with every book, with every contract you get.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I tell people I've done over 800 books, and I've never been on contract with anybody. Mm. Every book I've gotten. Now, granted, yes, I have had clients. Like I've had Blackstone as a client for almost 20 years, and we have a relationship. But I don't expect them to give me a book every month or every 2 months or whatever. It's we stay in touch. Grover just emailed me yesterday. He said, I think I have a book for you. It's a nonfiction title called blah, blah, blah. It's due this time. Were you interested in it? And I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, that's great. I can fit it in my schedule. And then, somebody else might call, and then, or if I see there's a segment of my calendar that's open, I will send out an email. We send out a newsletter and we send out feelers to people that say, oh, well, Shan's got a break in her, here in the middle of the summer. Does anybody have something coming up? So we're always looking for work. Mm. That's always. My wife tells her acting students that, being an actor, auditioning is the job of being an actor. Performance is the cake. It's the luxury part.
Right. That's the reward at the end.
Yeah.
Wow. That's very, very deep, very insightful. Do you think now we've been talking about narrators at the beginning of their career, getting coaching to get into it? What about continuing education? Narrators who've got 50, 100 titles. Is it necessary to continue your education in this realm?
Yeah, I think so. The minute you think you know it all is the minute you put yourself on the road to failure. I put a quote up on the Facebook pages from a book I was narrating about. Well, basically, to paraphrase the author, the leading indicator of failure a future failure is present success. Mm. When you think, oh, I've got 10 books in my line, I've been doing this for a couple of years, I don't need to do anything, I'm good. And you start to coast on the same tricks, the same bag of magic if you have it. And, right. And so to go to a workshop, to get some feedback from a new director, is always, to me, that's always good, and if you've been doing it that long, you should have the ego and the self-confidence to walk into a room and do your thing and not get freaked out when someone gives you feedback.
Right.
You have to have the, but yeah, I have, some of my students have been doing narration for a fair amount of time, several years now, and they've more than passed the 40 book mark, but they've always said, a lot of them come to me because they've all been doing fiction, and now they'd like to get into nonfiction, or they feel like they feel in general maybe there's stuff they just don't know, and because I'm such a type A personality, I'm Mr. 3 steps to do this and 5 steps to do that. Once again, I want to give them the structure and the methodology to give them the confidence to move forward. So yeah, even for me, I'm constantly listening to or watching YouTube videos and listening to other people, picking up, the nuances of what they're doing. I have my own sort of board of directors, as it were. I talk about that in the book I wrote called To Be or Wannabe, about having a board of directors for your career, people in your life who you can bounce ideas off of and gain knowledge from. And those people have helped me to give me feedback. They will look at not only my recording, but my marketing materials, my business ideas, so even now after almost 20 years, I still have people I turn to as teachers. So the short answer is yes.
Yes. Continuing education, very important. Yeah. Very important.
Always.
The guys have stepped in, and Mr. Basil, we have a question for Mr. Sean up here on the screen, if we can. Mr. Sean, I notice that you seem to be probably of similar genetic extraction as we are, and how would you say an Irishman could do in this business? You know, could a leprechaun have an opportunity to become one of you?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. Ironically enough, or interestingly enough, I have a new student. He's from Ireland, living in Tokyo or near Tokyo, so it's a very odd time change when we have our class. And he's got this amazing Irish accent. It's like this flute, this little piccolo going, and you know, like in any accent. I also have a woman now I'm teaching. She's from India, so she has a really strong Indian accent, that British Indian sound. Whereas the Irish performer, he comes from a theater background, and he's been working on his American accents to broaden his scope. The woman from India she's a writer, and she's getting into books, and she's very self-conscious of her accent. And I said, look, don't be, because that will be your niche within the industry. There are Indian writers out there. You could be doing their work, because that would be in their voice. If you have a very strong accent, and if you can't or won't change it, then okay, you're limiting yourself to the market. I always think like Holly Hunter back in the day, the film actress, and she always was going to sound like she was a West Texas girl, and that's just the way it was going to be. If you have the facility to change, to broaden and branch out into different accents, you should. It just gives you more material to work on. And so my guy in Japan, Gary, we're working on him, refining his American accents. If anything, just to have a neutral American accent, right?
Well, I don't think I'm going to be able to change mine a whole lot. It's been this way for 400 years now, so I'd imagine the market might be small for me and my brothers.
Oh, you never know. You never know. They could have a series of novels that based around, Irish Spring, the soap or something. And
that could do. The Lucky Charms guy.
Hey, the Lucky Charms.
Actually, he's kind of a dork, but we still, we're kind of related. So anyway, we have another question for you. Do you, perchance, do you see many studios with very small microphones? Like rooms set up for guys that are about, 3'8".
I've seen a lot of microphones. They come in all shapes and sizes, as it were. Are we talking about microphones?
Or studio box rooms.
Studio box.
They come yeah. We hide under Basil's shelf.
If it works, it works. I tell people for years, my microphone, I bought at Radio Shack for $200. It was one of those rock and roll microphones. And our first studio, like I said, was the Gemini capsule. It was tiny. I learned from a studio engineer a couple of things. The first was that, as long as it's sonically dry, as long as it's quiet, that's fine. We're not making Sgt. Peppers, and you're not going to be doing a lot of, you can do effects in post, but as long as you get a clean recording, that's what counts. It doesn't have to be this over-the-top thing. The other thing I learned, by the way, from that studio engineer, about other studio engineers, is that sometimes one of the worst things you can do is go to a studio engineer to get an equipment list. It's like going to a guy who sells cars and asking him what a good car would be. Well, you're asking someone who lives and breathes cars, and suddenly you're asking them, what's your dream setup? Mm. And I've had students come to me and like, well, I talked to this engineer, and he said I should get this special kind of studio phone that runs $10,000 a sheet or something. And I'm like, you don't need that. If it's quiet, we'll start with the regular phone first. And no, you don't need to get the Neumann. We can go with this other microphone. This is fine.
I went to school with a man named Neumann. He didn't seem to be very smart for making microphones, but boy, was he a businessman. They'd stuff expensive. So, right,
Oh, wait a minute, Feely. I have a question. I'd like to interrupt here. This is Neely, the next brother here, and Neely, being me, would like to ask you a question. If you were stuck on a desert island with no chance of rescue for at least a year, and you knew that no one would be coming for you, how would you cope with that?
Well, I'd find
Because it
the
could
ball,
happen.
and I'd find the soccer ball and make my own Mr. Wilson. And I don't know. I talk to myself all the time anyway, so I don't think I get lonely. Just ask my wife and my daughter. I talk to myself constantly. I'm always
Now, what if this island that you got stuck on happened to have a fully equipped recording studio with a working generator that was left over from the war?
right.
And you were able to do whatever you wanted, it just would never get outside until you got rescued.
I mean, what kind of material would I like to do?
Oh, sure, that would work. Or material you like to make up or something.
Oh, okay. Well, it's funny. I don't have as far as being a writer, I'm not sure if I have the imagination for that. But if I could record things, I would record the classics. I thought you were going to ask me if I had to pick certain audiobooks to be on the island with me to listen to. And I was,
Well, we could go that way too. Let's just say you happen to be like the guy with that soccer ball thing, and he had the FedEx plane, and yours happened to be an entire shipment from Blackstone Audio going to Timbuktu or something like that.
I tell you, I would be. I'm not sure exactly what the specifics books would be. It'd be more about the narrators.
Mm.
It would be, it's one of those really weird things. Grover told me this back in the beginning when we had our first meeting. He said, there's, narrators who rise to a certain level, they have a following. And so for me, it would be about listening to books by Marguerite Gavin and Kate Redding, Michael Kramer, Scott Brick, Muller, Grover, listening to Simon Vance. I would listen to Master and Commander series by Simon Vance. Has to be one of my favorite series of all time. So I've listened to the whole thing, all 13, 14 books twice through.
Oh, wow.
So it's more about the person's voice to me, because that particular narrator has such a level of skill that anything that they do, it's an old joke where you have a really favorite actor and you say, oh yeah, I could watch that person read the phone book or eat lunch because they were so interesting. And so
yeah, I'm that way with Stefan Rudnicki and Simon Vance could probably fill almost my entire schedule.
Right, yeah. And for me and Grover and there are just certain narrators that I would just, on the desert island, would do that. I would rather be listening. Mm-hmm. It'd be nice sometimes to take a break from recording. I average a book a week. I do 50 books a year. People ask me, they say, what do you do? What do you read for fun? And I'm like, I don't read for fun. I have a scotch and watched Walking Dead. That's what I do at the end of the day, because the notion of reading anything else is it's just too much for me. But I would listen. I would listen to just like anyone else does who's a fan of audiobooks. To hear that particular voice, to hear Kate Redding say do Atlas Shrugged, or to hear Mike Kramer read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, or to hear Grover's recordings of the Shelby Foote Civil War series. They're just amazing, and so that's what I would be doing while I was building my raft.
Well, that's a very educated answer you gave, and I appreciate that.
You said I was going to listen to westerns and erotica or something, but now that's really not my.
That's not what you're admitting to.
That's right. Yeah, my mom's gonna see this interview. So
and your wife is probably right on the other side of the door there.
Yeah, she's right there with the frying pan in case I get out of line. But no, that's what I would do. I mean, I love audiobooks because, and I love doing nonfiction. When I started, I think for most narrators, when you start, you're doing fiction. You're doing sci-fi and vampire stuff and shoot 'em ups and westerns or whatever. And when I started, I had those. But then just to keep the books coming in, because I knew I had to learn how to be a narrator, I called Blackstone Audio and Books on Tape, and I said, I will narrate anything that nobody else wants. Do you have a 2-volume history of wheat? I'll do it. I don't care. And they took me up on it. I mean, they'd sent me some stuff that was like, oh, boy. But I learned day after day what it took to go back in there and try to make that book the best possible book. And so when when I'm teaching people, when I'm trying to transfer that knowledge to my students, I'm trying to teach them to have that kind of mental stamina, that kind of grit to get into nonfiction, because sometimes nonfiction can be very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. And while fiction can be artistically satisfying, but not necessarily technically challenging, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Nonfiction, most times, it's not artistically satisfying. What it is it's intellectually stimulating. Right. I tell people that I'm really good at a cocktail party because I know a little bit about everything, it seems. Do you want to know how they drill for oil in the middle of the ocean? I can tell you. I did a book about the BP oil disaster. Do you want to know about the Great Recession? Well, I've narrated at least a dozen books about it, or cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. I just did a book about Bitcoin. How fascinating is that? Or I've just finished a book about the life of Philip Glass, the American composer. So, no, I'm not doing 1,000 voices, but for me personally, what keeps me engaged in the work over all this time is that quality of being a student. I'm always learning something new, and so that always keeps it interesting for me. Mm. After you do enough sci-fi or enough, don't get me wrong, I still love doing sci-fi or zombie books or westerns when they come, because now they're like a treat. But there was a time, like when I used to narrate for a company in Albuquerque called Americana Publishing, I did 4 books a month just for them, and they were like all westerns and sci-fi. And after a while, you're like, how many western voices can you create for another book? Or how many weird, the Princess of Zartha is coming to visit the Ulan Congress of blah, blah, blah. And after a while, even that becomes repetitive. For me, the nonfiction is about the intellectual stimulation involved.
Mm. Very cool. Do you feel like you got extra degrees? Like you've earned multiple bachelor's degrees over the years?
I had a conversation with Gilles Dana, who is the man behind Gildan Audio. And I joked with him that once I'd done so many, I said, I've done so many business books for you, I feel like I've got an MBA. And without skipping a beat, he's like, I'm sending you the bill tomorrow for the tuition time. I do. I mean, I feel like I'm, sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. I can sound like I know what the hell I'm talking about, but, that's good enough for me.
Well, that's good. Well, it's been awesome talking to you. Do you have any last bits of information, any tips to throw out there, or suggestions, or would you like to dance a little bit, show us your latest nightclub moves?
Oh my God, no! I don't. That would definitely need some editing. Let's see. If I can impart some information, I would tell people think faster in your narration. I would tell them, be patient with yourself. What you're learning is very nuanced, and it takes time. You're developing an ear like a musician. You're learning to look at the text like it's a piece of music, and you're speaking. You take it in. When you take it in, you're phrasing it in your mind. Then you're speaking it, and then the third step is you're listening and going, is what I hear the same thing as what I thought in my head? Is the melody of that sentence right? And that's really tricky. Mm. You're developing a very particular, it's taking the voiceover to a very particular place. And even if you come from a film or theater background, it's a very, very different skill. But you need to be patient with yourself. I tell people that you can't be perfect, but what you're doing is you're pursuing excellence. And so, and I still do this even today, after 800 books. Every book has its own unique challenge. So whether it's inhabiting Philip Glass talking about his life, or it's making the language that's very dense sound very relaxed because you're the expert in the book. You become the author.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I try to do is every book I set out as a small challenge for myself. It doesn't have to be a huge thing.
Mm.
I'm not trying to climb to Everest. But every book has a small challenge involved with it.
Mm.
That's the yardstick that I measure my success and my growth by. And so I guess what I would say is, even for people who've been doing this for a while, the worst thing you can do for yourself is just, grab the book and slap it up there and hit record and just start. Because then you're becoming a hack.
Mm.
And as you well know, is that there's a lot of people right behind you who are a little hungrier than you are. If you become a hack, they're going to go right past you, because eventually your skills will atrophy. So be patient, but keep pushing yourself. Set those little goals for yourself every day, every time you get behind the microphone, and you will always get a little bit better every day.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you, sir. And we're going to, like I said, we got here's a link again for the narrator test. Mm-hmm. And do you want to give information out as far as people contacting you potentially for coaching?
Oh, sure. If you go to my website, it's SeanPrattPresents.com. There's information on the links there about what I do and how I do it and all the nitty-gritty. You can find me on Facebook for Sean Pratt Presents. You can follow me on Twitter at SPP Presents. You can find my Twitter handle. My email is all over the place, but it's SeanPratt@Comcast.net. And I'm happy to to field emails, but I always tell newbies, if you're interested, before you contact me, go take the test, and that will tell you quicker than anything else whether or not you really want to do this, or at least explore this as a possibility.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Well, that's it. Say bye to Sean. Sean, say bye to the world. Well, not permanently.
Me and Wilson are going to go for a walk now.
Yeah,
so.
There you go.
So, Mr. Gerald, what exactly are your qualifications for this job as administrative assistant? Have you ever been a secretary before?
Well, I feel that the title secretary is actually somewhat demeaning in its historical context. So if you don't mind, we'll stick with administrative assistant, because I don't look very good in short skirts.
I see. But have you got any experience being an administrative assistant?
I have been an administrative assistant for many years of my life to my brother Harold. We lived in a cave, and I had to administer very many things for him because he was, for the most part, drunk and out of his wits. And so I had to do all the organisation for him, and I can write, and I can speak 2 languages.
Oh, you can speak 2 languages. That's very good. What languages can you speak?
Well, obviously, English and Troll.
Oh, well, that'll come in handy for speaking to trolls. Any particular dialect of troll?
Icelandic.
Oh, I see. Icelandic, troll, and English. Okay, we can use that potentially. Well.
So I got the job then.
Let's talk about pay. What kind of salary range are you expecting?
Well, my salary requirements are very simple. I don't need cash money because trolls got no pockets. So, instead, all I would need is room and board.
And exactly what kind of room and board are you referring to?
Just my sustenance, which would be 1 medium to large-sized moose or caribou each week for my meat, and 2 kegs of ale, preferably brewed in the Abbey style, and gravel.
Gravel?
Gravel for my bed, and the moose I could get for myself as long as I have time to go hunting.
Oh, well, that's rather affordable. And can you type?
Well, the keyboard would have to be rather large.
Well, we can accommodate something like that, I think. Let me consult with my brothers. Oh, brothers, what do you think? Should we hire him? Can we afford not to hire him? Will he smash up the house if we don't hire him? Very likely. Okay, give him a job. Okay, Gerald, you're hired. Welcome to the family.